Hello! Today, World Socionics Society is interviewing Peter Bartle. Peter Bartle is one of our London-based socionists and has helped greatly with World Socionics Society, giving his points of view and helping with celebrity typings. He'd also helped found Socionics Wikisocion with Rick DeLong. Hey, Peter.
Hi, how are you, Jack?
I'm well. I'm well. Just had an interesting day today actually. Vera Novikova managed to promote World Socionic Society on her page, so we got an influx of new members. So we crossed the 550 barrier, so that's good.
Right.
Right, let's begin with the first question.
Sure, go ahead.
Question one: how did you get into typology?
Oh, right. I'll make it as concise as I can, but essentially, oops, sorry. Okay. Essentially, if probably it was around 2005. I was hanging out in another forum, a forum about discussing things, nothing to do with socionics, and somebody came up with the idea, let's do an MBTI test. And then I did the MBTI test for fun, and I was shocked at how actually the ENTj description, the Socionics ENTj, I was shocked at how accurately it described me. And I was interested because of two reasons. First, because I've always been, since childhood and teenage years and stuff, I'm always aware that my ways of processing information and discussing information and conveying information were different from that of most people, and rare were the people who actually understood what I was trying to convey. And I always had an interest in history, and I was then also quite surprised at how that list of the MBTI, the list of famous ENTJs in that MBTI profile, I think it was the Typologic one, which I guess is still around. But basically, it did list a few historical characters with whom I had always identified. So that made me think, there is something to it. But I didn't pursue it much further, although I kept in mind, okay, there is a system which says I am an ENTj. Fast forward to a couple of years later, or maybe a year later to be accurate, where not go into details on that, but I had a relationship which finished in a way which left me sort of bewildered. And then I've tried to, since relationships, understanding relationships were never my strong point, and of course I never fell for that argument, okay, that's how people are, relationships are, it just happens, etc., which is what many people say. I felt the need to get information to understand what actually had happened with that particular relationship. And I thought, I'll see if there is something related to MBTI which can explain how people of different types relate. And to be honest, I was trying to find out, okay, I'll try to find out what her type of the person mentioned was, so I couldn't understand exactly what I had gone on. So, but basically, then searching for searching for types and relationships, eventually I ended up in Socionics, and those were early days, 2005, where there wasn't really much stuff in the internet in English, and I came across the 16 Types forum and the few information that was available online, which was essentially socionics.com and the 16 Types itself and some articles. And then I thought, okay, this is something interesting. It seems to be what I'm looking for. I'll find out more about it. And I got there and started a long story about myself getting interested to it, getting more involved into the forum itself, and later when Rick appeared into building up the Wikisocion. Yes, so it moved from being something that I got into to understand a specific problem into something I did, I won't say a hobby, I think, because I saw it as a useful tool to understand the world and to understand how the people work and relationships, and also because I could see that it helped me understand a few things about people and my life and relationship with my parents and family and all of the things which I never understood. And I increasingly saw that it made sense and it made some pieces fall correctly and make jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, so I got into it and remained interested until now. Not because, simply because to me, as far as I can see, it works. It seems to reflect something that happens in reality.
So to summarize, basically, you had this idea that it served as a useful tool that somehow enabled you to understand practical situations that you experienced in your relationships with others. And
Yeah.
so once you saw saw how it could be used as a tool, you then started to investigate more of your time into it, started to research up more information, and as a result to make it into something that is used as a useful tool in your life.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's pretty much accurate, because I mean, I have never had any problem understanding things related to science or technical subjects, because I am an engineer, a chemical engineer, and I know that if I have to understand a technical subject that I have to understand, no matter what. I mean, okay, and I have to get into this technical subject, which at the moment I know nothing about, but I know that if I put a mind to it and spend weeks or months or whatever doing that, I will understand it. And something that always puzzled me, because they seemed to be baffled and go beyond understanding, was how, and under people. And for instance, okay, why? I mean, the basic questions: why, at a very teenage, insecure way, why are there such guys popular and I'm not, etc. All of this crap. But I never really bothered too much about it, right? I sort of shrugged it off and said, okay, maybe that's how it is. I have other things to worry about. Until, of course, I got, as I said, involved in this particular relationship, which left me completely baffled. And I thought, no, this doesn't make any sense. I should really try to understand it. So, and asking other people, right? Asking friends, look, this happens. Can I understand that? And of course, the standard answer was always, well, you're thinking too much about this. There is nothing to understand how people are, etc. Move on. And this kind of answer never really satisfied me. And yeah, so basically it was, I saw Socionics as in a way, I mean, to make it maybe the most brutal way is to say, it helped me to put people into a sort of a system or a way to understand them, or a language I could understand it in the same way I have no other problem understanding other scientific subjects, so to speak. Make people more or less irrational, unpredictable, etc. That's pretty much it.
I see. Thank you. So, have you been interested in any other areas of psychology, or was it specifically just typology that you found yourself in?
That's a very good question. It's a very good question, actually, and it's even funny. Well, although the joke is on me, much before that, in other situations, right, in another life, and showing my age, back in the early 90s, when I also was going through a situation where I thought I just don't understand people, right? Basically, people don't seem to make any sense to me, and I don't make any sense to them. I actually started actually tried Freudian, Lacanian psychotherapy, right? Where essentially, because that was pretty much in vogue these days, and that's pretty much what people said, "Oh, don't try it." And okay, I'll try it. And that's the kind of stuff where the typical thing where you just go and you talk about what's going on, and the analyst mostly says nothing, but sometimes makes some comment. And I got into that, and I won't say it was totally useless. It was largely useless. And I always thought that, as crude as I think these days that MBTI is, that just reading that very early profile of ENTj and the other profiles connected helped me to understand things much more than all of the sessions of psychology, of Freudian, Lacanian kind of psychotherapy, right? So that is so basically I did get into that at the time, but I dismissed that as being useless. Now, if you're asking about the other kind of typology, like which are the Enneagram, etc., no, I only got into those as I started looking to Socionics, and of course, people start talking about them, etc. And then I was curious about it, obviously, and then I also got into the Enneagram, but that was after Socionics, and I never found that as useful and as interesting and as accurate as Socionics, although it is interesting in its own right.
And each time, again, it's a recurring sense of use. Is that you investigate it and you research up on it, and you then see whether it's useful or not. And if it remains useful, then you keep it. And if it's not useful, you can drop it.
Yeah, yes, it is. But I mean, yeah, but okay, useful in the sense that it reflects the truth. Like, for instance, okay, I don't know how can I put it. The most useful is a consequence of being accurate. Like maybe the most famous typology, which everybody I think has heard of and uses. It is astrology, right? The zodiac, right?
I was expecting Big Five for a second.
Oh, no. Actually, how many people have heard of Big Five, right? But a lot of people, right? People who haven't even heard of anything like that, they will have this story. Okay, you are like this because you are a lion or a Taurus or whatever, right? And it is a typology, right? And actually, I got into that years ago as a consequence of my brother, who was very much into many things. He got a huge book of astrology, and he started doing that in a supposedly mathematical way. So I got curious, maybe there's something to it, and I took a look. But it is a typology, right? But of course, the real problem with it is that it assumes that your typology is influenced by your birth and by whatever stars happen to be around in the sky, etc., which not only seemed to me scientifically absurd, but in practice didn't seem to work, because obviously it doesn't take much long to see that people can be born in very similar circumstances in time and location, but have very different personalities. But it is typology, and to me, I will never think that the zodiac would be useful in the sense that it is obviously, to me, not true, right? It simply doesn't reflect reality. While Socionics, and I have taken a lot of time looking into it and double checking it, does seem to me to reflect reality, not perfectly, of course, but it seems to me to be the more perfect of the available typologies around that I am aware of. So you said about being useful. Yes, I mean, something is useful to the extent that it reflects reality, because otherwise it may be useful. If it doesn't reflect reality, it may be useful from, it makes me feel better point of view, or makes me feel good point of view. But if it doesn't reflect reality, it is actually being sort of delusional, which is only useful in a very short term, not in long term. Like, for instance, if I want to feel good about myself, I can do what I'm doing now a bit, which is drinking a bit, right? But of course, there's not a longer-term solution, and a system which does not reflect reality cannot be useful, because anything that doesn't reflect reality is just taking you to the path of self-delusion, which can never be useful in the longer term.
Now, you said that what immediately connected you to typology was a description of ENTj.
Yes.
What characteristics jumped out at you as being particularly like how you see yourself?
Oh, well, that's interesting. I don't really, actually, I don't remember exactly, but I suppose I mean, okay, I will have to read the whole description, but concisely, I would say one of the things that that particular description said was that one weakness of ENTjs is that they expect people to make sense, right? And that's precisely how I was getting there in the first place. But essentially, what it was saying about having or trying to have strategic thinking, and everything that you do, in principle, should have a purpose, right? And you don't do things just because you feel like doing them. I mean, at least you know what you're doing and why and to achieve what, at least most of the time, right? And that you have a sort of strategy and you see things through logic and not really through the emotions of the moment. I mean, all of that, what I'm saying now, obviously sounds like any great any broad description of course, of logical intuitive types, but that was, at the time, if you read it, the other ones, they didn't really sound like the correct. Anyway, as I said, I mean, it was actually, it is less complicated than I'm thinking. At the time, it was simply like I took a simple MBTI test, came up as an ENTj. The test suggested take a look at the typology, or Typologic, or whatever it was, .com description, see what you think. It was an ENTj description, and I thought, that's me, right? At the time, I didn't really spend much time looking at the descriptions of the ENTp or the ENTp to see which was, right? Although later I did, but at the time, that was what made me think, okay, this is me.
Yeah, makes sense. Also, I noticed in those typologic profiles, there's kind of more focus on competence, on strategy, on actually accomplishing things by applying oneself in the ENTj description, but didn't quite exist in maybe the ENTp description.
Yeah, I don't remember, possibly, right? I don't remember that, right? It's been ages since I looked at the description, but yes, that sounds right. I do not remember now what was it that made me clear that I was more the ENTj than the ENTp or the ENTp one. Certainly not the MBTI ENTj, because as we know, the MBTI ENTj tends to be a very different figure. I mean, I know the interview not about talking about Socionics theory, but later on, actually, interesting enough, when I went into the Kirsey variation of MBTI, I found, actually, in some ways, I found it an interesting system, because Kirsey pointed out that even the ENTj remains an NT, so similar to the ENTp, ENTp, and ENTj, so not something different, which is MBTI, ENTj. So I thought that was, in some ways, I found in some ways the Kirsey superior than the MBTI pop version you see there.
Okay, so you say that you work in science. Is it in the chemistry?
Yes, I am a chemical engineer with a doctorate. I have a PhD in Germany. Sorry, I have a PhD from the University of Aachen. And you want me to talk a little about my work?
Yes, please.
Well, again, making as concise as I can. my career have taken me in many directions, geographically and academically. I've worked in Germany, South Africa, Belgium, the UK, which is my base, etc. And I've also done so I am my career has gone into essentially two directions. One, the pure, more hardcore science, which is where I develop, I invent and improve processes and products. That's what I'm going now. Right now, what I'm doing, I'm in a company which is trying to bring up a new product, and of the three, this product has three granted patents. Two of them are by myself. And my work now is very, very scientific. For instance, what I'm doing now, I'm talking to you from York, and I spent this week in York at the University of York, looking into some more of the more scientific points of the work, right? So that's what I'm doing now. At the moment is a very scientific, technical work. But besides that, I've also had a career where I was more into technical contacts with customers and technical service, even business development, where I, for instance, I would be responsible for giving technical support to all of the customers from a given field in the German-speaking area of Europe, because I speak German. And that would be then a combination of having to go there and on the road and talk to people and give them technical support, where I, of course, would have to have some slight salesman attitude, like, for instance, the basics of going there with dressing a suit and giving good appearance, have a minimum of basically being a bit of a politician, but that was still essentially a technical role. And my career has basically moved between these two, either between more hardcore technical R&D and product development, invention, and sometimes where I was more into, okay, I'm giving technical support to customers, or I have to combine some ability to talk to customers to the technical support, right, and helping them solve technical problems, and sometimes listen to their complaints, and basically going for the customer is always right story, even if I knew in my mind, okay, the problem is that the customer has not a clue what it's doing, but of course I couldn't say that. So this is pretty much, so going back right now, I am at a more of a purely technical R&D scientific role, engineering role, where I essentially, it's more the traditional NT kind of activity, so to speak.
So throughout this idea of using the knowledge base that you have to essentially give information to others to help them with their services. Of course, now you're working in science, making more. You say you're actually working more developments in the scientific area, but before you were giving information to people to help them with their particular difficulties.
Not quite, because I've made both, right? So it's actually it's more like I started out in a purely scientific field job, and then I moved into a more technical support job. Then I moved more into more scientific activity. I kept shifting between the two, but not because I wanted, I'm going to shift between the two. It's simply because that was how my career progressed, right? And my career progressing, I mean, sometimes, again, it was, crudely, okay, I need a job or a better job right now. What are the jobs available? What are the best jobs that I can get on? And sometimes in my life, it was the best opportunity, or who knows, even the only opportunity would be to move to jobs that had this characteristic, either more technical support characteristic, and sometimes coming back. So I've always shifted between the two, but sometimes for purely pragmatic reasons, right? Because that was the job available, or the best job available, or it was opportunity, it was there, right? I never really, it's not as if I thought, okay, I'm tired of doing this, now I'm tired of this. No, that's pretty much how my career developed.
So yeah, so you're quite all right with just changing specific what you're doing. You're all right with changes and ebbs and flows in your work.
Yeah, no, yes, as long as I feel I'm making progress, right?
Yes.
Obviously, because I've moved fields sometimes quite abruptly out of geographical location. But as long as I felt I was making progress or going to a place where my abilities could be used well, that was no problem. My problem was I would say just one occasion maybe, when I did what people say bad career move, when I moved to a position where I actually felt, no, this is not a position where my abilities or skills or what I do are actually being used to any useful purpose, and I started to feel, no, I'm basically stuck, making no progress.
Ah, yes.
What I'm do actually is actually when I think I make what I do makes no sense to myself and possibly to others. So what I did was basically get out of there as quickly as I could.
Exactly. It's almost as if as soon as you start to feel like you're not making progress, you feel stagnant, you feel stuck, and then you have to get out.
Yes, well, yes, although progress, not in progress in the sense of, but maybe careful. Progress does not mean necessarily, or even mainly, oh, okay, I'm doing this job now, so next year or whatever, or in next 5 years, I'll be doing something better. No, that's not that. It is more like what I'm doing now, does what I do now, to my judgment, make sense and is useful, productive, right? Let me put it as an example. For instance, sometimes I've done jobs which are completely brainless, right? I even worked for a while I was between jobs, sorting out post for the Royal Mail. That, of course, is a completely brainless job. You go there, and people say you, okay, you are you have to sort out this mail, and you sort it out until they tell you to do something else. This, of course, a completely brainless job, but in that time, it was clear to me, okay, this is just something I'm doing for a very short time, for no reason than to get cash. And in this case, I did it willingly. Okay, this is something I do. It's better than doing nothing, so I do that to get cash. And it is very straightforward. They pay you to do a mindless job, and you take the cash and go home. And that, although it's not something I like to do, and it has conditions, to me, it makes perfect sense. What bothers me more is a job which, even if formally or normally, because of how much you earn or because of your title or whatever, may look like it is something to doing that's making sense, you know in your heart, I mean, my mind is not. To give a concrete example, let's say that you would start a job where you were told that you have to develop the market for a new product in a given area of the world. And you say, okay, but when you look into it, when you look into that product, you know, actually, that doesn't make any sense. This product is not useful for that part of the world or for this market they're trying to do. The whole concept makes no sense. So even if they will tell me, okay, during 6 months, you are supposed just to do that, and before 6 months, you're not going to have to show any progress on that, I would have a problem doing there in 6 months, pursuing a job or a project that I know that is completely useless and makes no sense. I think it's a joke. I would try to, okay, I'll stay there in order to get money, but as soon as I could, I would try to do something else that I thought is something that makes sense, right? That's the kind of stuff I mean, right? So progress is not really, is more like, I suppose I don't distinguish the two so much, because if I'm doing something that makes sense, I rightly or wrongly think, okay, this in long term is progress. If I feel that I am doing something that doesn't make sense, that I'm doing something just for the sake of doing it, even though it's a joke, I suppose I feel not making progress, which of course I know is naive in a way that you can have dead-end jobs, usually in the civil service, as a bureaucrat, as a politician, or in the army, etc., where you know very well that what you're doing doesn't really accomplish anything, it's not useful. But people can say, okay, as long as you're being well paid and people think you're doing good, doing something, who cares? And I understand that, but I feel bad about myself if I do this, if I am in this situation.
It's almost as if it's not simply a case of just earning money. It's a question of, for you, it needs to be lending some sort of use or service to the world at large. It has to be some way helping or progressing things.
Well, yes, but not in the world in large, in a sort of idealistic way. Oh, I'm doing that, like in the old, corny, ambitious mad scientist. This is very important,
Oh, yeah.
kind of stuff. No, it's really as simple as I said. I mean, I suppose the following, right? I suppose it is that if I'm doing something, for instance, I'll give an example. If I'm stuck, I mean, as you know, I'm pretty sure it's clear, there are plenty of jobs where you are in academia or in bureaucracy or in the army, etc., where if you look deep into it, it will make no difference whatsoever if your job exists or not. However, it's also true that there are many examples of people who work in these jobs, and I know a few of them, who were in such jobs and they worked well until they retired and got a big pension, and nobody even noticed that. So the fact that what they were doing was in regards irrelevant or useless made no difference for their well-being. I think in my situation, if I am in a position like that, it's not so much maybe that I worry about this not being important for the world. I think I'm worried in a more selfish way that it puts me into a weak position, because if I spend 5 years not doing anything that is useful, I think, okay, which means that I don't have any skills that
Okay.
I can show. I think it's actually far more less idealistic than maybe you are thinking. It is really like that. If I have a dead end job, which is just creates the illusion that I'm doing something, if I happen to leave or lose this job, and if I were to say, okay, I spent 5 or 10 years doing this, and if somebody say, okay, but nothing that's useful, I don't think that I'm in a good position. Even though, so I feel the need to do something useful.
Yes.
So that I will continue to be useful,
You're,
even though I know that is a bit naive and idealistic, because obviously you may well spend decades doing something that we know is not useful, but it doesn't make a difference for their lives, because at the end of the day they continue doing something essentially useless until they retire. I understand that, but I can only say somehow I always feel the need. I have to do something useful and build user skills so I can continue to be useful and continue to be of some value, right? Financial and otherwise.
It's like, oh, your sense of value of yourself comes from the use that you bring, how useful you are to maybe yourself and others.
Yes, to some extent. But again, I mean, when you say others, right, is not in that idealistic way, right?
Oh,
It is really, right, more like, okay, it is really more like in a very, okay, if you work in a big company, if you notice that if you know that, okay, if you are left the company, it makes no difference to the company because what you do is actually useless, right? You kept thinking, okay, so maybe they will one day get rid of me, and they might be right in doing that, right? So it is more or less from this point of view. It's not about, is not so much about this idealistic feeling, oh, I have to go there and help people because it's good for the universe or mankind. It's more self-serving than that, right?
You like to feel like an essential part of a mechanism.
Yes, so that I am doing something useful, and therefore I'll be actually being useful, right?
As in, if they take you out, it'll just fall apart.
Yeah, but let me be careful about this because I suspect this may be coming differently. It's not about feeling the need of being a useful member of a community or something, right? It's about, for instance, right? If I were to be truly financially independent, right, I wouldn't concentrate on doing my own things, which I would think would be useful according to my judgment, right? Not just having having fun or etc. I would try to do all those things in terms of investing and creating and inventing. I just wouldn't worry so much about being useful in the sense of a company, because then the only person judging my value, my worth is myself, right? It is different from what maybe you are now, what I feel maybe you are taking. It's not about, it has nothing to do about feeling as a valuable member of a community. At the end of the day, I trust my own view of being useful or not, that of anybody else, right? However, I don't know if you see what I'm trying to
There's
get at.
that, exactly. There's that. You have the confidence to ascertain your own use.
Exactly.
It's not a question of needing other people to tell you you're useful. You know you're useful. You just need to have ascertained that you are being useful.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, something. What I've never done was to care about whether my boss or whatever it was thought about my work. I care in the very pragmatic way because what he thinks or she thinks, rightly or not, may affect my life. But in terms of, in an emotional way, like, oh, if my boss doesn't think I'm doing a good job, maybe I'm not doing a good job. No, if my reaction is, okay, if my boss doesn't see if I'm doing a good job or a bad job, when I do a bad job, then my boss doesn't know what they're doing,
Yes.
right? It's a different focus.
So you don't have you don't, for its own sake, value the effect, the emotional effect you're having other people. Rather, this is something which you are nevertheless aware of for pragmatic reasons. In the same way as you being exercising that political part of your personality when you had to go and actually work with clients and customers. It seems to be the whole people element seems to be more of a tool that you've managed to exercise to help you with the pragmatism.
Yes, but yes, up to a point, but not okay. In a way, yes, but for instance, it is different things, right? It's not as simple as that, because if I were to provide, when I was providing a service to a customer, right? It was, if the customer had a problem that I could see it was legitimate, basically my company had screwed up, then, and I could see, okay, my company screwed up, then I would do whatever I could to make this thing right, not because a customer wants it, because it was this thing that was right and productive. Now, if the customer would say, my company is screwing up, and I could see, no, my company did everything right, he screwed up. That's when I would get a problem, because if I would talk to my bosses, and even if they agree with me, they'll say, okay, but you cannot tell him that, you have to keep him happy. And then I would have to tell him some bullshit, or even do nonsensical things for the sake of keeping him happy, which I knew were wrong. Wrong in the sense of not morally wrong, but pointless. That was very difficult for me, because my inclination would be to tell him, don't you realize that you are the one who have no clue how to use a product, right? So this was a point where I couldn't do it very well, right? And what he thought of not, I couldn't care, right? Because to me, if he doesn't, because I thought, okay, this guy doesn't know how to do things properly, therefore he's an idiot. It is different if somebody has a legitimate grievance because we've done something wrong. Then I feel the need, not only a cynical need, but a moral need, if you need to actually to do it right. And then it goes back to this thing. And that's of course, or if the company has screwed up the customer. But if I would say, no, sorry, but the problem is that you've done this and this wrong, and the customer would be willing to, okay, can you then work from now on to see how I can do it right? There's been a problem, right? To be a problem when the customer would basically say, no, don't tell me I've done anything wrong. You've done everything wrong. Now you fix it. Don't tell me how to fix it, because that's what you have to do. And if then it was something which was completely hopeless, right? Because there was nothing I could do to prevent him from screwing up.
Yes.
If he wasn't going to listen, right? So, and okay, I don't know if I'm rambling too much, or if you answered your question. No.
I think we definitely got the gist of it. We can see how, at the end of the day, extroverted logic at the end of the day, there is this sense of use which comes through. The sense of ascertaining that is the person who's causing the problem, and that it's more important to identify what the problem is and how it can be fixed, as opposed to just smoothing things over. So that when there's a conflict between the making sure that the problem is identified so it can actually be made to work properly, and just smoothing things over, you always go with the former.
Yeah, but sure, but I mean, something could argue this way as well. For instance, let's say the example I gave. Some people would say that even if the customer that's where it falls apart a bit. So let's say the example I gave, which is actually based on my real experiences. Let's say that the customer is completely wrong. He was the one who does not have a clue how to use the product.
Yes.
Yet he's too stubborn and arrogant to want to accept that. And my bosses would say, we agree with you, but we want to keep this business because it's money. So just humor him, or her, if it was a woman, doesn't matter, and do what he wants, even if it's nonsensical, as long as it keeps him happy, so they get the cash. Now, from a purely financial and purely cynical way of thinking, I understand his logic, and you could also argue, okay, we told him what was the truth, he didn't want to listen, so if he wants to damage himself while giving us more cash for something that he's not going to do properly, is not a problem. And I agree with that to some extent, because once you've tried to tell somebody the truth, and this person refused to listen to it because of arrogance or stupidity or stubbornness, I think you've done what you could. And I agree with that, which is why in such situations I played along with it. Only it was extremely difficult for me to talk to such people and not give them the impression, actually, what I really think.
Your intellectual contempt.
Right, so this is the kind of stuff
Yes.
I'm talking about, and also because maybe it goes back to what you're saying, because even though from the point of view of a company, it makes sense to do this as long as you're not doing anything morally or legally wrong. But on the other hand, if you think, okay, I'm doing things which means making tests or analysis or whatever, which I know make no sense for the point of view of humor, a person who has no clue, even though it may make sense for the company in terms of getting the person's cash. If you think about it, I'm doing something that is pointless, right? And that's something which bothers me, because I would say I could be more productive and do something useful by talking to somebody else who will know what they're doing, right? And but of course, sometimes there isn't such a person, which is basically sometimes the conflict I have to deal with.
And also by being made to do things that are pointless, you feel as if you are less of a useful person.
Exactly, right? That's precisely correct, as if it was a joke, right? Even though, I mean, because even though, of course, again, in the context I explained, right? You might say, okay, but if there isn't any customer available that will replace this stupid customer, the best you can do is to work with them. And I understand that, right? But then as I understand it, in the sense in that life sucks kind of sense, right? Because ideally, I will deal with people who do things properly and rationally.
Okay. Next question.
Sure.
How are you at home?
Okay.
What's your
How
hobby?
precisely?
For instance, just what are you like? Say you explained a lot of how you are at work. How does your behavior change when you are at home?
At home, when I am by myself with other people. I mean, at the moment.
Let's go with by yourself at the moment, because we got a question from other people later.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I was thinking about this question. Can you? Okay. Can you give me? Okay, I'll try. At home, I mean, I essentially do what I don't even know how to answer this question very well. It may be significant. Can you give me?
What do you do when just left to your own devices, when there are no needs that you have to satisfy from other people and other expectations? When you're just left in your own, what do you do for fun? What do you do that is interesting? What are your hobbies?
Well, I mean, it depends on the definition of hobbies. I mean, one of my interests, of course, is doing what you're doing now, which is talking about Socionics, right? But okay, I'll try to be as concise. What I do when I am on my own is a combination of, okay, if I am after a hard day at work, right, when I am physically, mentally exhausted, and I'm not seeing friends or my relationship, etc., what I actually do is to read about something I find interesting, or the alternative these days is to watch a video about something I find interesting, a documentary or something, or sometimes usually something that I feel is useful, something interesting or useful. Makes me laugh or etc. Usually I read or see a movie about something I find interesting. One of them things are Socionics, right? For instance, I like participating in the community, also because I like to see what people are talking about, etc., and make me think. It's not so much because of the social interaction. So essentially, at home, when I have, or elsewhere, if I want to relax or if I want to rest after working a lot, my default mode, okay, I'll just get a book or websites and read about subjects I find interesting. Not subjects I find funny, but subjects I find interesting and up to a point useful. Because for me, actually, in a way, what is interesting is, well, useful, or at least I tell myself that could be useful. Now, if I go if you're talking about when I'm on holiday or I'm on the weekend, then I do some things which I think are useful in the sense of, okay, I mean the opposite stuff, okay, if I have, well, getting up to date with junk mail or paperwork or making sure I haven't paid any bills, and or buying groceries or tidying up something up or fixing something in my car which I haven't done yet. Obviously, I mean, this kind of stuff. And since I am more of a person who tends to spend a lot of time in my mind reading, I force myself to do something more physical, right? To whether it is hiking or biking or this kind of stuff, right? So I do have. I'm not a person who relaxes easily. Relax in the sense of, okay, I'll just sit there on a garden doing nothing for hours, but for the sake of doing nothing, relaxing. No, I can only do that if I am exhausted, right? If I am not exhausted, even if I am okay, I'm going to sit in the garden and do something, but while I'm sitting here, I can take this, I can catch on with my reading or my paperwork or my emails or whatever it is, right? So I'm always active, not by choice. I find myself, I'm always active in something, even if it is something just mentally active, not so much physically active. For instance, I don't know if that's going to be a question. Something I could never do, ever, is those holidays that people take, like go to some hotel in the coast of Turkey or wherever, or Tunisia, where they go there with the purpose of spending a week essentially doing nothing except lying about. I could never do that. If I were dragged in such a situation, I would take with me a stack of books or at least files on my Kindle. Okay, I will sit there, but I will catch on my reading, work later or not, right? So yeah, I mean, so even if I'm not physically active, I am always mentally active.
Thank you very much. Right. Now for the question regarding people. How
Yes.
are you with family?
Okay, I can answer this question, but can you be more specific about exactly what kind of answer you're expecting?
I think more like how are your experiences with family? What were some of the things you felt that dealing with family you had difficulties with? Maybe things you found particularly easy with family. I'm also going to ask a similar thing with friends and relationships, if you're comfortable answering about
Sure.
relationships.
Okay.
It's just basically the different kinds of people and interactions with them.
No, family, you mean my immediate family, parents and brothers and
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Yeah, okay. I mean, my situation is a bit maybe different from most people because okay, I'm geographically away from my immediate family, right? And although of course my immediate family consists this day of my mother and my brother, my father passed away 10 years ago, and none of my family or my relatives are within anything like reasonable distance, right? I keep in regular touch with my mother, regular phone calls and etc. And I keep a very distant relationship with my brother. It is almost like a non-relationship. Essentially, it's not that we are estranged or something. It's basically that we don't have anything to say to each other, right? Although, for instance, as I said, we live thousands of miles apart. But if he would say, oh, okay, next week I'm going to be in your neck of the woods, can you pick me up at the airport or wherever it is? I would say, okay, of course, I'll do it, right? But we don't have anything to say to each other apart from saying, okay, how are we doing? We've done this and that, right? So we don't keep in touch for the sake of keeping in touch and just say nothing. With my mother, of course, I basically call and essentially say, oh, I've been doing this is happening, etc. It's not just formal. but it is like this. And I do that mainly because I know she likes it and she was happy, rather than because I necessarily need it. Although, of course, I also want to know that she's well. But on the other hand, as far as practical concerns are concerned, I don't worry too much about it because my brother is the one living very close to her, and I know that if she did something concrete, he'll help her. So I'm not concerned about that at a practical level, right? So as far as family is concerned, and with my cousins, which are mostly in Austria, I keep a relationship which is sort of, we can spend years without talking, but if I go there or if they come here, we'll call and then you meet. I mean, with cousins is something which is complicated because obviously you don't choose them. So it's not like friends. You have a sort of a relationship that is there, and you know that in principle you can trust them. But they are not necessarily people you spontaneously hang around with. Right? These are your friends, right? So I think that's pretty much it, really. I suspect my relationships with my immediate family these days are rather minimalistic. And when I lived there, when I was younger, of course, I didn't really get along very well with my father. There was a fundamental clash of personalities and of priorities and ideas and behaviors. So I essentially I kept out of his way as much as possible, right? So yeah, so the only person of my immediate family I had more of a spontaneous relationship, and I still have, is my mother, right? So that's pretty much it, really. There isn't really much more to say about it, I don't think.
And so you say about the difference between raising with your family and your friends, that you can choose your friends.
Yes.
So what is how would you say you are with friends, and how it might be very different?
Well, I suppose that yes, that's a very good question. My friends, my true friends, right, are essentially those I feel or I know I can be totally myself with, right? So, for instance, those that if I am in their company, I can be. I don't have to. Yes, I know that they're not going to essentially misunderstand what I'm saying, or if I make let's say I have a sarcastic sense of humor sometimes. I know that even if they don't, I know that even if they misunderstand the particular humor, they're not going to. I know that they're going to think, this is just Peter doing some kind of joke I haven't understood. It's not him being an asshole or something, right? So basically, it does where I'm not okay. It does. My friends are those with whom I am not afraid or don't have any reason to be afraid of being myself, right? Because I know they understand me fully and they know what they're getting, right? So that's where I can be relaxed and essentially, and of course, I know they can also be fully themselves, and I understand them for they are. To give an idea to what I mean, right? A couple of weeks ago, my girlfriend, she asked me to go with her to meet some friends, as she called them, that she hadn't seen in 5 years before. And she was very nervous about meeting them, about behaving the proper way, or making sure you don't have bad breath to a very obsessive way even, and making sure she or I wouldn't make any faux pas. And of course, I'm not talking about being rude, but I think if you are obsessed about not getting anything wrong as far as this is concerned, then in my opinion, these are not your friends. They are acquaintances in some way, but they're not really your friends, because your friends are those who are not going to break up with you or a friendship or take you badly if you make a slight faux pas or mistake and here and there, right? So basically, you don't. So friends does. These are, for instance, I do a lot of that in business context, and of course, you have to worry about whether you're not making a false impression, or if what you say not going to be misunderstood. But my friends are those where I don't have to be obsessed about it because I don't care, or because if I would say or do something that they find objectionable, they'll say me directly, look, actually, I don't think that what you said or did was very nice. You know what I mean? It's basically what I know.
I see. In other words, it's not a question of them just silently deciding, oh, that's someone who I'm gonna stay away from now because he said that. Rather, they'll confront you on it if it's not acceptable, and they'll let you know.
Exactly, right. Which basically I'm always aware of the state of the relationship, right? So my friends are essentially people I can trust to be straightforward with me from this point of view, and I don't have to. Of course, I mean, of course, when I say I don't have to worry about offending them, of course, I don't offend them, but I wouldn't, right? But if I would say something that they wouldn't like, which I don't think ever happens often, but if I would say something that they wouldn't like, they would basically, if it did bother them, they would let me know, right? And then I could know what situation the relationship is. Not people who would drop hints or expect me to get a hint, right? So that is I mean, so I'm not sure if I've already answered this question.
Yeah, but that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Okay, finally, how are you with relationships?
With?
Relationships. If you're comfortable answering.
Sorry?
If you're comfortable answering that question.
Well, yeah, sure, but are you talking about romantic relationships, etc.?
Yes.
Okay, no, I'm not comfortable getting into deep detail, right? For a couple of reasons. First, because, I mean, even though I find extremely unlikely that any past or present relationship is going to see this video, I still don't like discussing that. And also because it's a subject very private. But so basically, but let me put it this way. I mean, as I said, I'll answer this question in this way, which is true. Whether with relationships or with friends, I much rather be on my own than with being with someone with whom I don't want to be, right? Yeah. For instance, I'm not one of these guys who has, going back to friendships for a bit, for a comparison, I'm not one of those guys who have a circle of 20, 30, 10, or whatever acquaintances and says, okay, I want to do something this Saturday night. Whom can I hang out with? Oh, I'll call this person. Oh, this guy whom I really want to be hang out with is too busy. Then some guy or woman, for this matter, calls me, and I think, oh, I don't really care much for spending time with this person, but it's much better being with this person than being alone. So okay, I'll hang out with this person. That's exactly the opposite to myself, right? I mean, yes. Either I'm alone or I'm with somebody I really want to be with, whether it is a friend yes. or a relationship, right? Because I can be on my own very well, right? And so my relationships, if they survive or they take off, right, from the first couple of dates or whatever it is, it's because I really want to be in this relationship, right? Mm-hmm. It's never just something that I am doing just for the sake of doing it. It's always something because I value being with them.
Yes.
And of course, and the problem, of course, that I have met in the past, and that is where Socionics helps. Sometimes, of course, I understand it's not always like that. I mean, sometimes the other person will see you just, okay, this is the guy I hang out with or have a relationship with, as long as because whatever, but not because I have a particular liking or for this person, but because, okay, better than nothing. Of course, there is sometimes a clash, but that's not how I am. So essentially, if I am in a relationship, it's because I really want to be in this relationship. If I didn't want to be, or if I was half-hearted, I wouldn't be there in the first place, right? So I think that's what I can say about it. I mean, not sure how much detail I even can talk about it or remember. No, but if you ask specific questions, I can try to answer.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think that basically is summed up kind of what I was looking for. That people aren't simply to create an atmosphere. You actually need to like being around that specific person, and when you actually pick specific people who you would like to hang out with, and if those specific people you can't hang out with, you're not going to pick just anyone. You'd rather be alone.
Yeah, that's perfectly correct, right? Oh yes, I wasn't even thinking about that. I mean, I know why you said that, but I was thinking about that. No, I mean, there's all this story about people being just an amorphous mass. Okay, this maybe sounds a bit too harsh to create an atmosphere. No, I don't relate that at all. Okay, I'll give a good example, which maybe explain what kind of a person I am from this point of view. I have been going, and also explain my approach to relationships, not romantic relationships, but in general. I not too far away from where I live, actually very close to where I live, there is a pub, a nice, quiet pub in Hampshire, and I've been going there for 5 years now. And everybody, the staff knows me, the landlord knows me, and I like going there. Simply like, okay, when I come back from work, especially at night, rather than go straight home, I like to stop there so I can get a beer and sit in a comfy chair and use their Wi-Fi or whatever. And I am very polite, not only hypocritically. I like sometimes talking to the staff whom I know, but something I have made a point of doing and possibly come across as rude is the following. There is a crowd of guys, well, it's all these guys who are regulars there, and they are always there. Well, not all of them all the time, but the same. I think you know what I mean. There's always a crowd of regulars there. And when I first started going to this pub, sometimes they would ask me, "Oh, how are you doing?" and start conversation, and I would be polite, but would essentially sit at my desk and do my reading and do my thing. But the reason, so I've been avoiding getting into contact with such people, not because I dislike them, not because I think, not that. I think the problem is, that's what I felt, is that if I were to start getting into a closer pub relationship with those guys, even about talking about nothing, etc., being polite, etc., I would find them difficult to move away from that. Because if I go there a few times and start chatting with them, I would find difficult to then later just say, "Oh, sorry, I'd rather not talk to you. I'd rather just sit there and do my thing." And so I make a point of, so from the beginning, I made a point of not getting dragged into this kind of even very casual relationship.
Yes.
Which I wouldn't be able to get away from, because I think it's different. If you just go there and you never started this kind of relationship, maybe they will think you are just this guy who's a bit antisocial and prefers to read books, etc., but doesn't talk to people in the pub, and they ignore you, which is pretty much what happened. But if you start talking to them, and one day you decide, actually, I don't want to talk to you today, I just want to do my thing, I'd rather not talk to you, then it's more like a slap in the face, an insult, which I
Yes.
would find more difficult to handle. And the reason why I never wanted to be drawn into talking to these people is because, honestly, what they talk about in a pub is 99% of it doesn't interest me at all. So in my case, I understand very well that some people go there and drink and talk about nothing, and for the sake of doing that and getting a laugh and laughing a lot and feeling good, and understand that's what they get from it. Is not, they don't get from it a meaningful relationship or a friendship. That's besides what I get. But
Yes.
that is not something I like, to go there and talk to guys or even women, if there were any, to drink and get that. The effect I would have in me is not that. The effect to have in me was, I'm here talking to these guys talking about nothing. I much rather be sitting there reading a book, right? Because rather than wasting my time talking to these guys, because I don't get anything from that, and actually they will not get anything from either. If, however, but there are people, whether I'm a close friends or my relationship, with whom I really prefer to spend time with rather than be my own reading book. You see what I mean? Right?
Yes.
So it is, in a way, it is very elitist and very in a way arrogant, etc. Because I am judging people and basically deciding those people are people whose conversation and company I don't find interesting at all, and I find being in the company a waste of time, even though they might be perfectly nice and decent people. That's not a question. But I just think, okay, I don't want to spend time talking to them. And to be honest, if they would find my conversation, my presence also boring or interesting, I have a problem with that. I don't know whatsoever, right? I take for granted, actually, that you choose at a personal level with whom you want to spend time with according to your own personal needs. So this whole idea that, okay, I'm just going to spend some time talking to some guys at the pub about nothing because that's better than being alone.
Yeah.
That's something that I don't relate to at all, not for a second. And actually, it took me a long time to realize that, because I always thought, not always, I mean, when I was younger, much younger, I thought that the people who hang around like this because they're truly friends. But of course, that's not how it works, right? Basically, they just want to basically, this guy in the pub they're talking to each other, but they might be talking to anybody else who's just be there.
There's no real selectiveness for them. It's more
Exactly.
about a general mood, a general sense of banter and small talk, and a general that they get an enjoyment out of that. Whereas
Yes,
for
which is
you, it's
something
like yes.
something that doesn't work for me at all, none whatsoever.
And for you, it's almost like, say you go to a freshers fair and you see all different stalls and clubs, and you got to choose which ones you're going to spend your time to subscribe to, and actually use a certain amount of time and effort establishing. You're only going to go to those which you're going to enjoy, and you're going to be a good use of your time in terms of establishing some sort of relationship with those people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, yes. I mean, as far as I understood you correctly, yes. I actually, for instance, something that I've noticed as well. I am almost completely impervious to the outside mood. Like, for instance, this is something that it took me a long time to realize. Something that has no effect on me whatsoever is to go to a party, for instance, when people are laughing and dancing and listening to music, to lift up my mood. Like, for instance, okay, oh, you are in a bad mood or depressed or something, let's go to a party to make you feel better. And I always found it strange until I understood, again, when taking personality types, how people are different. That never had the slightest effect on me whatsoever, right? If I am feeling, if I am feeling worried or depressed because of something, whatever it is, right? I never thought I'm not going to feel better or stop thinking about that because I happen to go to a place where other people happen to be dancing or there's music. I mean, I think, well, what does that have to do with anything, right? And I understand that is part of in a much lower level or lower intensive level. That's what people get from these kinds of conversations in the pub, right? But again, that's all that fits together because I don't get anything from that at either level.
There's no value for you.
Sorry?
You just don't value it.
Yeah, I don't value it, but because it literally has no effect, right? I mean, I'm more actually, it's interesting. I'm more likely to in a way. I mean, it's the external environments that clash very obviously with whatever state of mind I am myself internally. They are more likely to annoy me, right, rather than change it, right?
Yes.
It's so yeah, that's all I can say about it, really.
Right. Okay. Next question.
Okay.
What are you good at?
Oh, what I'm good at. That's yeah. See, I'm good at. To sound stereotypical, but it's true. I'm good at learning new things. When I say new things, not necessarily new physical skills, like because for instance, I'm good at learning how to play new games in terms of cricket or baseball or basketball because I've never really been a very physical person. In terms of, I mean, it's not that I couldn't learn them, but of course, never something I want to spend my time with. I'm good at learning new subjects, right? Like, for instance, I can say this, I have moved jobs and fields often in my time. And of course, when I moved into new jobs and new fields, I would get there and sometimes realize I understand nothing about this field, about what the company does. And you go to a meeting, oh, I'm obviously the one who understands the least about what's going on here. But in at most 6 months, I would be one of those who understanding most of it. Even if 6 months before I understand it, and I would understand more, understand the field better than some of the guys who will be doing that for 20 years. And it sounds maybe a bit bragging, but it is true. And that sort of annoyed some of those guys because they tend to think I was bullshitting when I said after 6 months I would say no, but I think this is the way that we done, etc. And the others would say, yeah, right, this guy thinks he knows everything after 6 months. Well, the thing is, very often I did know it. So I'm very good in actually changing into new subjects if I really get into them, right? So that is maybe the things I'm best at, essentially using. And I guess I'm good. And the second thing I'm good at is actually timing, right? I can't even explain it, but for instance, whether the right time is to start looking for a job or something like that. Usually, not always, but usually I get it more or less right? Because I am very good in seeing the trends. Some people say I'm very good at being a good rat and knowing how to leave a sinking ship, but I'm good in seeing where the trends are going and taking decisions based on that. And sometimes knowing, that's very important, knowing when it's best not to take a decision. Sometimes there is a saying or a phrase which is to say to somebody, don't just sit there, do something, which sometimes is true, but sometimes it's true the opposite. Sometimes it's better to say, don't just do something, sit there, right? Because sometimes do something for the sake of doing something might be even worse, right? So I think I'm pretty good in knowing when to do something and when not to do it, when you should wait. Sometimes maybe I may, sometimes I'm getting it completely right, but I think I have a good sense for that. So these are the things I'm saying. I'm very good at. I think I'm very good at explaining. I've said I'm very good at learning information for myself. I think I'm very good in explaining things and conveying this to others, although maybe sometimes I may not be able to dumb it down. Hello? Oh yeah, sorry.
Hello? Yeah, no, you. I think the connection went a bit funny there. No, no,
It's not the connection. It was the iPhone saying that I had 20% battery, but it's I still have, so I can go. No, you still 20% still okay. You can go.
Okay, good. Yes, and I think I've noticed this a lot with extroverted logic users. I think I'll explain it later, but I'll explain later exactly what my theory on this.
Yeah.
I want to. One thing I noticed is that when you find something which you want to learn more about, you often you don't stick to very conservative areas. That you've gone into areas like you've even tried out astrology, you've tried out the more obscure areas in psychology, because you kind of thought there might have been some use, and you weren't afraid to go off and try it out and see whether it was useful or not. You didn't just dismiss it out of hand.
No. Yeah, although not out of hand, right? Okay. No, not out of hand, right? I mean, actually depends, right? Okay, I mean, for astrology, I did that when I was much younger, right? Today, I wouldn't even get into it, right? So let's be careful. I mean, there are a few things that I dismiss out of hand, right? So I think, based on my own criteria, for instance, some sort of more what I would call outlandish conspiracy theories, right, of something like that, I dismiss out of hand, in the sense that there is only so much time one has, right? So I'm careful about not spending my time in things that to me are obvious, that are not worth it. However, acknowledging that maybe in some cases I may be taking decisions too quickly, right? So I think that's pretty much it, right? The subjects I'm interested in and the things I dismiss out of hand or not are those that I judge, is it worth spending my time there or not, right? I think that is, and that I, if they seem to me plausible or not, which does not necessarily mean I get it always right, right? So I suppose, so I don't think, yeah, I suppose that's, however, I think that's the main issue, right? For instance, let's say one of these more outlandish or strange, when I dismiss, if I would see some of them and I'll decide, okay, and I'll look into this, it doesn't have necessarily to be, I know they're rubbish. I may even think, okay, maybe there's something to it, I don't think so, maybe there is, but I don't think it's worth investing my time looking there right now, right? So it may be more subtle than somebody already knowing for certain, no, this is complete rubbish, right? For instance, based on my knowledge, I can already say some theories are completely rubbish. Like, for instance, I'm not going to spend time, except for my amusement at some point, looking at, I don't know if you know it, David Icke's theories, right? About, you know what I'm talking about, David Icke.
ICKE.
ICKE, yes. That's a guy who thinks that the world is ruled by conspiracy theory of
Oh,
reptilians from the
yeah, yeah,
constellation
yeah,
who are shapeshifters, etc. I've seen some interviews with him, and I think he is he's either mad or is he show, right?
yes.
And I'm pretty sure that's the case, although it's of course not impossible that he's right and I'm wrong, right? But that's, at the moment, I'm not willing to spend my time looking into his theories more deeply, right? So that's where I come from this point of view.
Okay. What are you bad at?
What I'm bad at? Well, I'm bad at pretty much what I said before. For instance, to cater to the whims of people who are clearly being unreasonable and stupid. Basically, it is my weakness in the case when I'm working with customers, right? I have no problem working with customers in technical service or support, etc., if they are being at least somewhat reasonable.
Yes.
I have a problem dealing with those people who are being irrational and rude and completely stupid, because then my inclination is to say, well, then, well, I won't say it being rude here, but I think you know what I mean, right? That's my inclination. But of course, I know that a strength of people who are truly commercial and sales people is to basically, or politicians, is to tolerate such people. I am very bad at that, because even when I try to tolerate them, I think it's clear that I'm being fake, right? So I am very bad. I think I'm very bad at of hiding my truth opinions, I won't say feelings, my true opinions of people for whom I really have bad opinions about, right? If I don't know them yet, or if it's neutral, I don't have a problem, right? But of course, I tend to be I tend to give people benefit of the doubt. But if I made my judgment, okay, this person is either stupid or bad or lazy or whatever, or unreasonable, then if I made this judgment, then I'm very bad, and then welcoming this person with open arms and saying, "Oh, well, how are you doing? Lovely to see you."
Yes.
I'm very bad at doing that.
It kind of sticks, and you can't quite ameliorate it. Once it's stuck, it's stuck.
Yeah, and no, I mean, of course, no. I mean, if obviously I made mistakes, and maybe I judge a person wrong, and after some time I may realize I misjudged this person, right? But of course, everybody made mistakes. But while I have this judgment, I'm very difficult overruling it. And it sounds stereotypical, but I'm very bad, really very bad at understanding really how some people are affected by things I consider as completely irrelevant and unimportant, right? And by that I mean, like, okay, it sounds stereotypical, but this is true. Like, for instance, how okay, I'll give an example, right? That's how I best explain things. When I was living in South Africa, I was lodging with a guy, and it was a house, quite a nice house, and I had free use of the whole house, and I had my room, and in my room I could do whatever I wanted, and that was always okay. But I also like to sit in the main living room, and I would sit by the armchair and reading some books. It was before Kindle or whatever, so it was real books. And I started having, I always read several books at a time. So I was having a pile of books by the chair, and rather than take the books to my room and bring them back to the living room, I started leaving them there because it was because of bringing them to read there. And I'm talking about books, not talking about food remains or something, which of course are dirty, bother me as well. Talking about books, and eventually the guy whom I was lodging exploded because he was really bothered by the fact that I was reading this pile of books, talking about 5 or 6 books, leaving them in the living room, but there by the chair, which surprised me because first, books are not dirty, and secondly, you can move them in a few seconds, right? And I left them there simply because I said, okay, I'm reading them there anyway. I didn't think it makes sense to bring them back and put in there, but he felt somehow that I was invading his space, so the books were bothering him. So one day he exploded and said, can't you keep this in order or tidy? Why do you have to have these books lying about? And I was shocked that anybody could be bothered by even this slight bit of untidiness, have a few books lying about. When again, I mean, I'm talking about a few books which could be removed at any point. But I do realize that some people have this idea of their living room or whatever, which is very precise, very tidy, and this slight disruption of that, however, I find, and I think it is really minor, I have difficulty understanding how this can have an effect on them, even in something that is really, I find difficult to see how anybody can find it important. But so I find difficult, and sometimes, of course, I exaggerate how much people. I am bad at evaluating how these things can impact people or not.
Yes.
Right. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah. Again, I have difficulty evaluating this impact on people. How this kind of detail affect people. Sometimes I exaggerate. Sometimes I think, okay, I cannot do this and that because it's going to bother people when they don't, right? So I have difficulty as understanding how this kind of petty detail, which in itself is not important, does have a strong effect on some people. Because I do find it difficult to care, really. To be honest, I don't give a shit, right?
Yes.
And I have a difficulty understanding how people give a shit. And of course, with Socionics, I can understand, right? But I'm very bad at really understanding what kind of effect this kind of stuff has on people.
Exactly. It was like you have difficulty understanding how the physical details and your effect on the physical details may have effect on the aesthetic harmony that other people hold important, and you just don't care about that.
I don't care.
If it doesn't seem like it's of importance, then you don't see why it's an issue.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. It's 1 second. Let me just make sure I charge the iPhone. Okay, now this should be okay. I'm just going to change my background a bit. 1 second. Okay. Sorry. Okay. No, I mean, I'm very bad at evaluating how people see these things. I can understand people not liking stuff like. I'm going to pick myself. This is the kind of stuff I'm bad evaluating how people are affected by this. Also because sometimes I do find people are a bit irrational. Like for instance, when somebody is okay, let's put it this way, right? I mean, why people would. I have difficulty putting this kind of stuff ahead of truly. Okay, I'll make another example, right? For instance, where I work, with chemicals, chemical engineering, I have to worry about the pollution and environmental impact, this kind of stuff, right? And I do a lot of work in making sure that what's emitted by the machine is on environmental standards, measured as per criteria, objective criteria. And it's very frustrating when, no matter how much I do work about that, and I know it is working according to this criteria, that some people then complain, oh, but I can feel some slight smell, and I think there's a big problem because of the smell. And I keep saying, look, smell is something that people sometimes feel, and objectively measuring there's no problem. And I also say about pollution, the important thing is not what you can smell. The important thing is what you can't smell, because a lot of stuff that is very, very dangerous and very harmful, you can't smell.
Yes.
Right? At all, right? For instance, natural gas that you have that you have gas for burning in heaters, in heating in the homes. The gas itself, you can't smell.
It is, yeah.
What they mix some sulfur compounds to give that characteristic smell, so you can smell them.
Yes.
Right. So they make something that is inodorous, stinky, precisely so they can detect them. So, and it's very when somebody does not care about the what's actually happening, but always now suddenly is obsessed just because talk about a slight bloody smell, as if that was the most important thing, or basically, I don't care what your readings or the criteria or the law says, I just know that I don't like the smell. I find this very difficult to deal with when talking to adults, right? Because I suppose I'm not very good at catering for people who give so much importance about their subjective perception of whether something is ugly or pretty or something is smelly or not, right? As if that was really the most important thing, right? That's So because I don't care about these things that much, of course, I'm very bad at creating an environment which is favorable for that, right?
Yes.
So that's I'm very bad at and finally I'm very bad at that's probably socially it's not a very good idea. I'm very bad at pretending I'm finding somebody interesting whom I'm actually finding very boring or uninteresting. Right? So I'm very bad at playing this kind of
game
or political games. Right. So that's pretty much what that's the kind of stuff I'm bad at. I can't imagine of anything else in particular. I mean, not anything that's very very relevant, I suppose.
Is there anything that what brings you admiration and criticism from others?
Actually, is related to what I just said, right?
Yeah.
For instance, my girlfriend now, she criticized me precisely for what I just told you. I mean, because basically, I mean, like I mentioned that we went for acquaintances of hers. She was very worried about creating a good impression, which we suggested, and not really her friends, right? And to be honest, I mean, I was particularly impressed by them. So I actually, although I was polite, I suppose I also didn't disguise that I was actually bored. And she then criticized me. Oh, you obviously wouldn't find interesting what they were saying. And of course, I couldn't say anything to that because the answer would be, yes, that's correct. I wasn't finding interesting what they're saying, right? So that's the kind of stuff causes criticism. And yeah, pretty much what I said about what I'm bad. What I'm bad at causes like, yeah, that's pretty much that I don't really have a problem. What I am cause admiration by others. Yeah, I mean, I think it's what the other singers said I'm good at, like at work, that I'm a very good problem solver and that I can get pretty much into things. Essentially, my competence in things, my honesty. I think people they may say I'm too. I've been accused of being too honest, or even of being too professional, right? Essentially, in the context of talking to people, like I just mentioned, but nobody ever said I wasn't honest enough or not professional enough or not competent enough. My criticisms have always been in this kind of soft, statical or emotional things. When I was working, not in the actual hard profession, I think I've also been admired by, I guess, by being very patient in explaining things to people, even people who have little knowledge. But of course, that only happens if I feel they are willing to talk and to listen, right? Not that's when so basically I'm also selective from this point of view.
Yes. Okay. Next question.
Sure.
These are the last two questions, and they both describe opposite situations.
Sure.
Question 6. Describe your ideal place, setting, or world. And what is atmosphere and surroundings, its inhabitants, the conversations and philosophy?
Okay, my ideal place in the world and this the kind of philosophy or whatever. Yeah, pretty obvious. I mean, my ideal situation, my ideal place is when I am with people with whom I can be myself and they can be themselves, and I don't have to cater for, like for instance, I don't have to worry about whether I cause the right impression, whether I'm listening to them carefully, whether my body language is correct, or my facial expression is correct, etc. Whether I don't have to worry about it because I know I'm not going to be misunderstood. So essentially, among people that I trust and who know me, and who trust me, so I don't have to worry about these conventional things. And a place where whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm doing something that is interesting and that I feel it makes sense and it is important to myself actually. It doesn't really go further than that really. That's basic, pretty much it really.
Okay. Last question. Describe a bad place, a situation where you feel hopeless, inferior, and insecure. What would be causing these insecurities?
Yeah, I actually must say this. I must say that these days, I'm not sure about situations that feel me hopeless or inferior, right? Because there are situations where I am sort of useless because my skills are not adequate to the situation. But I don't feel hopeless or inferior because I'm aware of that, right? I'll give an example, right? Actually, which makes me when as you know, because we've talked about it, I go for the last maybe 10 years or more. I've been trying to go to the Edinburgh Festival every year, And when I go, I make a point of not sitting in the front seats of an event, because I don't want to be one of the guys dragged participating in the show.
Yes.
And not because I am shy or something, but because I know I'm not the right person for that. And unfortunately, I was into a show where there are some guys doing, and then of course they were basically had very rigid rules. They forced people who just enter first to sit in the first 2 rows, etc. So I sat in the first row, and obviously I was dragged into participating in the show, and it's difficult because they of course I'd rather not go, but the moment of course you say no, I actually don't think so, but they drag you, and of course rather than make a scene, I went to it. And of course part of the show was at some point I had to run through the stage screaming blah, 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 like this, and I did it, but I know I did it very badly, right? and I know nobody found it funny or interesting, and that didn't make me feel inferior. It made me feel, if only these guys listen to me and not drag me to do this, right? It's a situation I find unpleasant, but not because I particularly care about that people look at me and say, oh, but this guy can't really do properly, because I knew that is something I wasn't going to do right, so they shouldn't have dragged me to do that in the first place, right?
Okay.
Right? It's not because I felt embarrassed or something. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt more like, oh, this is not going to work because I'm not the kind of person they should have done that. Have done this, right? So basically, not hopeless. I don't think that's being hopeless or inferior. I mean, it's basically an awareness that I'm not the kind of person that should do that. And yeah, and of course, I actually, that's precisely, I think, what situations where I find myself that I cannot give other examples, but examples I can is the same, where I've been dragged into activities or situations that I knew I wasn't the best person for it. And I even said that before, look, I'm not really the best person to do this. And the people who I told that, oh, no, you do fine. And then it didn't work. And I knew exactly that was going to happen, right? But I think a situation where I was put into having to play a role that I knew I couldn't play well. And I think my problem is not that I feel, oh, maybe basically my thinking of these situations is not maybe I should learn to play this well better. My thinking is, how do I why don't people listen to me when I say very clearly that that's not going to work, right? But I won't say inferior, really. When I was younger and more insecure, as is often the case, I tended to feel more inferior in the typical party-going area, right? Okay, basically the very typical social party-going environment, right? Because I never could get into it, right? But then I realized, okay, but I don't get into it because I shouldn't have to go into it, right? But once I realized that, I stopped worrying about it. So I think the problem is as follows, right? With this question. Now I'm very well aware of the situations where I'm not the best person to be around and where I'm not what other people would want to have around. And if I have my way, I avoid the situations. And if I am dragged into them by other people, despite my warnings, then my reaction to that is, okay, they have themselves to blame, because I knew exactly what was going to happen, right?
It's almost as if you're like a high quality monkey wrench, and you're in a toolbox, and someone putting on a nice fancy dinner decides to, instead using a kitchen utensil, take you out of a tool kit and use you to eat food. And it doesn't work at all. They can't actually grasp the food at all. It's been completely. It just hasn't worked out nearly as well as if they just used a fork.
Yeah, forgetting it right, yes. And yeah, and is the tool to blame for that, or the tool if you feel embarrassed about it, right? So I think so. That is the so when I've been in situations, I think the thing is that in many situations or such situations where you could see, oh my God, you should feel embarrassed or you should feel inferior because you weren't up to it. I think I don't, because I think, well, but I knew that, but why wouldn't people listen to me when I said that's going to happen, right? So I refuse to take the responsibility, and if I don't refuse to take responsibility, then I have no reason to feel inferior or embarrassed about, right? But I can't. But to be more helpful, to what I'm trying to do is such situations would be situations that demand this kind of cool people, social skills, getting into the mood and creating a friendly and social environment and getting into this, etc. This kind of environments, I not using the phrasing where I feel inferior or weak, but the situations where I know that I'm not the best person to be in the situations and contribute to it. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Excellent. Okay, so that's all the questions now.
Okay, cool.
So if anyone's still watching, I'm going to give my analysis. So if you don't want to have your ideas spoiled by watching this video, you can turn off now. Okay, Peter.
Okay.
I think that you are a logical, intuitive extrovert, but you definitely knew that already. I think that not only are you a logical, intuitive extrovert, but if you're going to go into accepting, producing subtypes, I'd say you're probably the logical subtype. And I feel that you compare and contrast very well to Brian, who I interviewed before, who seemed to be more the intuitive subtype. And that there is a strong emphasis throughout on the extroverted logic. And also, I can definitely see it as your leading function, in that everything seems to be about you being useful and being considered of some sort of use or practicality.
Yeah, I would also say about looking at actual information, right, rather than the emotional implications of the information. I have one question then for you before you go.
Okay.
Has anything I said surprised you in a way that you thought, that I didn't realize that, or this is strange, or is it something new?
Nothing surprised me, but a lot illuminated things for me. For instance, going into the first of all, looking into exactly how you saw things in terms of being useful. It's not necessarily a case of the idealistic making things better, so much as almost your self value comes from knowing that you are a being of use.
Yes.
And I think that clarified for me.
I think this is one of the clashes between maybe gammas and deltas, right? Or maybe delta and Fs. Deltas, they have more of this idea. They have to be useful more generally, at least a community. While gammas, they are more, I would say, more selfish. I mean, they are useful to themselves and to the people they find, or the people they are close to, or people they choose to be close to, but not so much about useful, which is a bit different for not being. And although it's not quite as that. I mean, okay, there is something as well, right? Very strong, which is that the idea that something has to be done, and I do it, because if I don't do it, nobody else will, right?
Yes.
And it's not so much about, oh, I want to feel useful. It's because if this is not to be done, is just being stupid, right? And the stupidity is something, and things being done, not being done because of stupidity, is something which I find offensive. Although I mean, it's okay. I mean, I don't want to continue, but it's because it has a lot of nuance, right? Which is sometimes difficult to convey.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, one thing I do need to I just want to go into more aspects of your model A, just so that
Okay.
people are going to be
Sorry.
if people want to look at a certain argument for LIE, I just want to fill it out a bit more. So also looking at introvert intuition, it makes sense very much in the creative context, in that you definitely see the sort of longer term use. It's not specifically the instantaneous how useful it is. It's far more about where is it going. You need to be making some sort of progress. And you see this not in terms of immediate am I earning money. It's more a question of are you being useful over a longer period of time.
Yeah. Yes. Although yes.
And also, you do have that. There's certain background use of extroverted intuition as well, and that you can see the possibilities. You can see where something it could possibly be useful, and you're right going in and investigating the area. You're not going to dismiss it out of hand. You can see where something has potential to be of use.
Oh yeah,
And
no,
you
definitely,
kind of
right?
combine. Yeah, so you kind of combine what is useful and what is interesting. They kind of flow and become the same thing for you when you're doing your reading and you're pursuing your hobbies.
Yeah, but I must confess something. I think that maybe that's one of the clashes of extroverted intuition with introverted intuition is that I think that extroverted intuition dominance or people they are probably better in I have an idea or I'm trying this or I'm getting to this, but that's not going anywhere. Who cares? Because I have this and this and this. And I suspect that introverted intuitives might see that as giving up, right?
Yes.
Which because the beta gamma story is okay. You have this, and that's where the sensing comes. You have this path which you chose, correctly or incorrectly, but you chose it. And if you don't follow it, and if you say, okay, I'm going to do this, but somehow is now not going anywhere, or etc., I don't be bothered about it. Oh, but there is something else, I can do this. I suspect they tend to see that as this giving up, while I suspect the extroverted intuitives, they just think, okay, it is stupid to try to do something which is obviously not going anywhere, or is being too difficult, or is basically, I mean, who cares? There are so many other things to do. Why bother about this one thing, right?
Yes.
And of course, the reason why introverted intuitives worry about this one thing, because this one thing has achieved a special meaning for them, which is then very important. And I think for extroverted intuitives, they are less likely to attribute particular importance to one of these paths they can take, because so basically, okay, if this one is not working, or this one is become boring or difficult or take it too long, okay, who cares? I'll do this. But so it's not really giving up, because they are not that invested into that in the first place, right? I'm not sure if you understand what I'm saying. Or if
So yeah, exactly. But it's a question that you don't just drop something. You need to stick with what you're doing, because you need to be developing and going somewhere. You can't just say there are lots of different things you can be doing. Yes.
Yeah, because the reason why you got into it in the first place is because it has some particular meaning, maybe for completely arbitrary reasons.
Yeah.
Right. But the question is, Yeah, I mean, now I'm not sure why. I'm a bit tired. I'm not sure why I meant, but I just wanted to
I think
to mention that.
it's a good point. Also wanted to say about you certainly aware of when you're being political, when you need to make certain efforts to come across in a better way for a part of your job. It's not something that's completely escaped your grasp, something which you can recognize about doing. However, as soon as it conflicts with your sense of what is being useful, what is being done, you or your sense of where someone else is clearly making a mistake, you need to be blunt about it. You need to let them know that they're making a mistake,
Yes,
and
but
you can't be political when it overrides that.
yeah, but that's something that I don't want to misunderstand it, because you say about being useful. Useful can be also understood in the extroverted sensing way. Useful in the sense of achieving the goals at any cost, right? Because you might also say that, for instance, as I mentioned, if you cater to some stupid customer, it
Mm.
may be useful because you're getting his cash. So from a
Yes.
cynical perspective, it may be useful. So it's not just useful in the sense of achieving goals at any cost. It's more of the that's more of the extroverted sensing kind of stuff. I have this goal. I'll just crush walls to go through it. Is more about really having a concern about what is objective reality and what is true and what is correct, right?
Yes.
And it is a sense that if you start if you start in the path of twisting the truth
Mm.
for the sake of achieving short-term goals, that you get into a path of where you don't know anymore what is the truth or not, what is real or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then if you lose that, then you're going to collapse, because at the end of the day, you can only achieve or succeed or even survive if you are operating within the constraints of what is real, right? What is truth, what is correct, right? What is objectively
Mm.
true. I mean, objectively true, not in any metaphysical sense, but in things like, is this chemical process or this machine working properly or not, right?
It's
That's what I
reflected
mean.
in the
At
results.
this
Yeah.
very, very much, very fundamental level, right? Is this economically the best solution or not? Is this going to be more expensive or cheaper or not? At the end of the day, things can only work if you do
Mm.
know this. If you start if you start to say, okay, this method is more expensive or less efficient, but let's do that because
Mm.
to please that person who has power, and this person got into his head that that's the best way of doing it. If you do that cynically, okay, I mean, as long if it is once you can do that, but if you start doing that and losing sight of what is truth, of what is correct, what is real, what is relevant, what is not,
Mm.
you in the longer term you end up going towards destruction, because that's a path you don't want to get into, right? So that's basically I'm just making this about what the meaning of the word useful, right? Because I think if you just say, "Oh, this is useful," yeah, I mean, it can also be understood in the purely extroverted sensing political way. This is useful
Ah,
because it gives me power to achieve my goals, right? And it's not just about that. That's what I just want to emphasize that.
exactly. It's not purely a question of it just getting you what you want. It's a question of a process actually being reflected as one that actually works.
Yes, exactly, right?
Mm.
Because getting what you want for the sake of what you want, right? It's the end of the day, it is about power, and power is
Yes.
about extroverted sensing, actually,
I
right?
think it's a crucial difference between extroverted rationality and extroverted irrationality.
Mm.
That one is about the standard for itself, whereas the other is more about a means of getting things.
Yeah, um, yeah, I suppose. I mean, and I haven't thought about that, but as I said, I mean, I just wanted to emphasize
Yeah.
this because you kept thinking about it is useful. And again, I mean, one can be very useful. Useful can be being in the sense of pure uh, power accumulation, right? Which is not really extroverted thinking. Not even it's not even my goal, right, or my purpose, right? So, okay, I mean, it gets very complicated, of course, because one can always say that in the particular case, like abusing, that okay, you have to cater to the whims of a particular customer to get cash so that the company can survive to do more useful things. Sure, I mean, when you think about in those terms, one could argue that okay, at the end of the day, who cares that you are keeping one particular imbecilic customer happy? I can understand this, right? And I would play along with it. However, I'm just saying that this is the kind of stuff that in this situation one has to be aware of what one is doing, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I think I get a sense of it. Okay, also, finally, in terms of your weaker functions, so the
Yes.
vulnerable function and the suggestive function, we can see,
Yes.
first of all, that you didn't actually. I was actually surprised you didn't mention it as much as you did earlier in the video when you were answering about what you're bad at. But this idea that you have very much difficulty actually just sitting down, relaxing, and just switching off. You kind of need to be active or doing something which has some sort of purpose. And as well, you find yourself reading, you find yourself going on hikes, you find yourself doing anything that is other than sitting down and just resting for a period of time.
Yes, but I'll tell you something, right? Something that I've noticed not too long ago. In relation to almost everybody else I have met, I am essentially unable and unwilling, but unable to switch off my brain, right? It took me a long time, and that goes to the social adequacy kind of stuff, to realize that when people are together in a group and drinking and talking in a conversation that flows in every direction, right, without any logic, it took me a long time to realize that when people do that, they have essentially switched off their brains.
Yeah.
Because they want to switch off their brains, because they find switching off their brains relaxing, right? They want to basically, to laugh about things that are not really funny or a funny superficial way and move from subject of the other in a very scattered way. And they're not really interested in the context of what they're talking about. They're interested just in this in the interaction itself. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I'm essentially unable and unwilling, but also unable to get into this state of mind where my brain is switched off, right? So if I am in this kind of social environment that I described, I do two things. Either I just sit and say nothing, and I just pretend to be a part of it when I'm really not. Or if somebody says something that I find interesting, I may ask about it with the intention of talking more about it, but in a serious way, which of course disrupts what everybody else is doing, because what they're feeling in the moment. So this is a state of mind where you actually switch off your brain and you just let your thoughts or your moods take you wherever you want, which many people find relaxing. This is something that I never get into, right?
Incapable of doing. Yes.
So it may be a question of introverted sensing or introverted feeling or whatever, I don't know. And the relaxing goes into that as well, right? Because even if I'm physically not doing anything, either I'm thinking about something or I am reading something to think about something, right? So relax in the sense of, okay, I'm going to sit there and not think about anything, unless I'm sleeping, obviously. That is something that's a kind of something I never get into, right? And it took me a long time to realize how different most people are in this respect. Right, so maybe this is part of relaxing, maybe this has to do with weak introverted sensing, maybe has to do with, because introverted sensing is the ability of, I would say, not ability, but introverted, the more you focus on introverted sensing, the more you're focusing on your purely sensorial input, and the more you focus on your purely sensorial input, the less you're focusing on more abstract ideas in the brain, because you're just becoming a flow for the immediate sensations. And maybe, and since I cannot really connect to this, maybe that's how the two things are connected, right? But that's pretty much my experience of that.
I see.
Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense to me. In that, I can definitely see the yeah, exactly. Just switching off, just letting your body just flow with whatever's going on, and just turning off that sort of more detached, logical, abstract thinking things over. One thing, also, finally, this idea of introverted ethics, the suggestive function. I
Yes.
suspect you definitely value, or you kind of need environments where you're around certain people who you can just be yourself around, where
Yes.
and where if it's something if you do that is unacceptable, they're not just going to let it go. They're actually going to confront you about it, so that you know that it's something that is wrong.
Yeah. So basically, what I know.
Yes.
So that I know at what points what the status of the relationship is, or the status of their opinion of mine is, etc. Right? Actually, something that I've been thinking of. Actually, the suggested function, when it is fulfilled, is what relieves the pressure on you having to do work on your role function. That's the way I see it. So, for instance, if I am in a situation where the reason why, if I'm in a situation where I know people around me know who I am and accept me who I am, and I don't have to worry too much about these, how they are going to be emotionally affected by what I do, the less so the more my introverted feeling function is fulfilled, the less I have to worry about making sure my role function works right. And I think it applies to everybody. Like for instance, let's take the LSI, who is the extroverted feeling, this is suggested function. The more is around people who are going to have conventional emotional expressions to him, to the LSI. Let's say, in a very simplistic way, everybody around the LSI is very smiley and happy, and obviously seeming to be delighted in the company of the LSI. The more he gets this kind of very obvious, diffuse input, the less he has to worry about what every individual around him is thinking, or what everyone is. The more he has to use introverted feeling to actually understand his relationship with each of them as individuals. You see what I mean? It's the precise opposite. So the fact that he's getting positive extroverted feeling from everybody else around him in a way that's easy to understand as a whole. Oh, everybody is happy, then they are happy. I don't have to worry about Johnny or Marky or the thing, because it's the whole. So it relieves him the pressure of knowing that them individually, right? And with extroverted feelers as feeling as their the opposite, you find it difficult to cater for this extroverted feeling diffuse thing. You'd rather be certain that everybody you are around as individuals, you know who they are, so that you don't have to worry about this diffuse commonality extroverted feeling thing. So in all of this, I think if you apply to all of the types, if somebody around you is the one supplying you with the suggestive function, one reason, not the only one reason why this is relaxing is because it relieves on you the burden of having to worry about your role function.
Mm-hmm.
because the role function is a compromise, right? Because what we really are,
Ah, okay.
the role, I would say the role
That that
function
that, that
actually.
that's a new dynamic. I haven't heard of that particular dynamic before.
Well, the role function is what humanizes you, right? Because
Yes.
left to your own devices, so to speak, if you could be just yourself, in an extreme case, you be just your first function. But that would be, everybody would be just your first function, would be inhuman, right? Because
Yes.
that would be the LSI who is purely introverted thinking, makes no exceptions for the sake of special case with the feeling. It would be the LSI who is completely focused on this subjective attitudes to people, never tries to be objective. But so nobody, so the role function is it always what softens the extremity of your base function. It what makes us human, right? But it is a slightly an effort, because the most relaxing thing is to focus more on your extrovert, your base function. Actually, the most
Yeah.
relaxing functions, I would say, are your first and your eighth function, and your dual by fulfilling your suggestive function. One of the effect is that it relieves on you the burden of having to focus on your role function, right? Which is seductive, but also limiting, because it works very well if you're around people who supply this function, your duals, but it makes you sort of ill functional if you have to react with everybody else.
I see. In fact, it's like, in a way, it's like a reverse of the dynamic I thought between immobilizing and vulnerable. So, say the mobilizing I saw as being like a sort of buffer for pain in the vulnerable function. You play up your mobilizing function so you don't feel inadequate in your vulnerable function. And
No,
with
I agree with that.
yeah, and in a way, it's like it's like the mirror opposite for suggestive and role. That you put on the role because it's a role you have to put on to get by in life, and so the
Yes,
suggestive sign disengages that act and allows you
yes,
to be more natural.
yeah. For instance, right, another example. Look at the ILI and IEIs, right? They have introverted intuition as dominant function and introverted sensing as role function. But what does that mean? Let's take an example of the IEI. For instance, the IEI, left to his own devices, might well prefer to spend all his time, I only using him to make it easier, but of course it could be also a woman, to say the obvious. The IEI, left to his own devices, might well prefer to spend his time only in introverted intuition, thinking about his poetic images, or thinking about living in his or her own world, his world of artistic imaginations or whatever, and not focusing on the introverted sensing daily lives at a very primitive level, eat or feed yourself, or even get things going for your daily life. If you have somebody who provides extroverted sensing, who is control over your environment, the more somebody controls the environment around you, the less you have to worry about your bodily needs, because they're protected by the environment in a very stereotypical, politically incorrect way, right? That is precisely the truth that there is in that idea that if you are an IEI, you will be likely to marry for money, because if somebody is already controlling the environment around you, you don't have to worry about these petty things like getting food or etc., because it's all being taken care of. And in the case of the introverted sensing dual seekers, is the opposite. The more that somebody is providing directly to you in your dual function your bodily needs, etc., feeding you or taking care of you, the less you have to worry about controlling your environment to making sure you protect and get these things, right? Which goes back to, okay, the ILE would be the guy who is very happy even with not a very good job and poor, as long as he has his daily needs fulfilled by a caring SEI, right? Is happy because doesn't care about money and power as such. Daily needs are. In the case of the IEI, would be, okay, I know that if I have somebody who controls the environment and I'm protected about that, I don't have to worry about focusing on my daily, on my food or drink, etc.
Yes.
Because this is taken care of. So I mean, I know the difference can be subtle, but I think that is, of course, all of that is simplistic but I think you know what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, I definitely got the idea of a dynamic. I do find that as an ILE with my extrovert sensation, my assertiveness goes entirely, my toughness goes entirely as soon as I'm given something as introverted sensation, and I just kind of melt into this rather passive sort of person.
Yeah. So I think and for instance, right, in the case of the extroverted senses, right, the extroverted sensing in itself on its own is the pure force without purpose thing, right? Basically, loose cannon, right? Yeah, I think it's a good point. A pure extroverted sensing is essentially loose cannon. Force, violence, strength without purpose or direction. Extroverted intuition is what basically says, okay, rather than just fire a cannon, let's try to find out where to shoot a cannon. There, or here. That's the role function. But the cannon would just rather, if there is somebody who just says, no, you just don't worry about finding out which direction, just shoot the direction, that's it.
Yes.
Okay, then I have, so again, the input of introverted intuition gives you a sense of direction.
It gives them a sense of purpose, which overrides brainstorming.
Yeah, exactly, right. You don't have to do brainstorming to find the sense of direction, because the sense of direction has been given to you very straightforwardly, right?
Yes.
So I think the exactly what you get from your introverted, from your suggestive function can be usefully understood as something that gives you a break and having to worry about your role function, because again, your role function is something that you do because you have to, because there will be people who are going to expect you to do it, or situations, and it is what you have to, but it's not something that you really want to do, right? Because it is something that dilutes you from your pure sense of self, of your reality, which is the first function, right? So I think, I don't know, I mean, I think understanding how this interact, right? And of course, I mean, it become more difficult because obviously this kind of mechanism also operate, as I said, between mobilizing and the more vulnerable function. I think the difference is between, and it can be subtle, but the difference is between that which you think you should do yourself, which is mobilizing function, and that which you think ideally others should supply, which is the suggestive function, and what you do grudgingly, because the role function is something that you only do grudgingly, right? You can do it well, but you do it grudgingly. While the mobilizing function is something that you actually, however bad you are at it, you feel you should do it and you feel you should be better at it, right? And our inclination is to relax into the 8 function, but it's always something that it gives you a sense of defeat, I think, right? Okay, if I'm not doing anything, I can relax into the 8 function, but that's too easy. I'd much rather be doing something on the mobilizing function, right?
Yes, I do get a sense of I get more. I can feel I could very easily use extroverted logic and make things and just go about implementing things, making things work. But I feel myself more interested in actually influencing people and
Yeah,
actually controlling moods and actually because I find that's a more experimental ground for me, something which I can try. I might fail at. I might and something which I actually feel as if I'm improving on that area, whereas the other I don't think I'm actually going anywhere with.
yeah. I mean, and of course, with me, obviously, I mean, and I think that's where we meet, right? I mean, when we
Yes.
are both talking about extroverted thinking, introverted intuition, like talking about Socionics theory, is something very easy for both of us, right? Although you probably would then prefer, okay, but rather than have this dry conversation, you might be better talking about it with people who you can basically to entertain or teach or basically socialize. In my case, I do that as a hobby, but I sometimes think, actually I should, this I can do when I'm relaxing and after a day of work, right? But if I do that too much, I'll be thinking, no, but I should be doing some actual work of some kind, right? So that is the, I think so, but I think for both of us, it is very easy and seductive to relax into the first innate functions, right?
Yeah.
I think, and as I think if you really know how a person consistently relaxes, I think it will tend to be relaxed or have fun, right? I think, or not what the person feels they should do, right? Like for instance, like the LII or the ESI, who like to spend a lot of time doing sports because they feel they should be doing like a sports. No, I mean, I think what they actually do when they are really thinking, okay, I'm taking a break, I maybe should be doing something else, but now I'm taking a break, right? So I think that's more when you see the first, that's when you see the first and the 8 functions working together.
And one thing I've noticed, that often when we're speaking to each other,
Yes.
there is often the sense that we convey information in very different formats. In that, I often go towards a short, maybe a crisp analogy, and I try and deliver that. And I often feel the need to very quickly summarize things in a quick analogy before going off into another possible way of thinking.
Yes.
And in contrast, your way of doing it is to go over a lot of information and give a lot of factual information out.
Yes.
And also, I do find we often have difficulty. We often have to convert each other's formats in our heads when we're communicating.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I think we can do it. I think I understand that. I think it has to do. Yeah, no, it is true.
So I often have this, and it's especially when talking to you, I'm literally staring very, very still, and I'm essentially really concentrating my efforts to try and break down the factual information in a way that I then try and jumble it into a quick conceptual picture.
Yeah.
And I noticed that that's often the case. It's a sense of conversion, and I get a sense of always with extroverted logic users, because it's
Yeah.
exactly the thing with my father as well.
Yeah, I think. I understand that. I think that's okay, I'll have to talk about in maybe not non-Socionics terms. I think that what happens is, 1 second, let me get.
I'm just going to pick up that glass which I dropped.
Yeah. I think that what happens is that what I try to do to minimize that is to first give my conclusion, right? Summarizing, okay, that's what I think, and now let me explain how I get it. I think is that if somebody just tells me that's what I think and that's it, right? I'm skeptical because I think, okay, that's what you think and say, but why? Why do you think that, right? And because, and then if you don't know how to explain it to exactly why you get there, where you get there, I'm not sure I can, and I know, I'm convinced that you know what you're talking about, right?
Yes, I often get the sense that as soon as I give a picture across, you immediately think, ah, no, but I mean, you try and dive in and try and correct it or try and expand more information on this part or that part, and exactly, I never find that we're entirely satisfied with each other's way of conveying the information, and so we
Yes,
often have to try and correct each other's way of doing it, almost because
yes,
each other's methods are almost counterintuitive.
yeah, yes. Even if at the end of the day you may agree. No, I think, yeah, okay. Actually, I'll try to compensate for that. No, I think that's it. And if you think in terms of duality, right? Because I am programmed to talk to ESIs. The ESI doesn't want to understand things, wants to know things, right? And if you talk, give a lot of information, they will capture what you're saying, even if you don't understand how everything fits together. And if you just give the information, oh, that's it, the conclusion, they will think, well, this is all there is to it, right? I think that's pretty much how it works. While the SCI has already an information or an understanding and just wants essentially from the ILE, yes, that's it, oh, it is correct. Okay, good.
A good example of Alicia, she's putting together this new model, and basically what she wants from me is to take her perceptions and just stick a convenient label on it. And that's something that I'm pretty good at doing. I immediately get a sense of what the exact crisp word that summarizes it very quickly and very concisely and neatly. I just put that back to her, and that's exactly what she wanted. So
right.
exactly, and it's almost very, very different approaches of approaching similar things between the quasi-identicals.
Yeah.
I've also noticed that the extroverted logic approach takes a lot more time.
Yes, because extroverted logical tries to take more time for the sake of giving more information.
Yes.
Right? But I think extroverted illogical, right? I think the fundamental idea is this, which doesn't work with all people, obviously. It is more or less like this, right? It is a sense of, okay, here's the information. That's information. I can guarantee this information. You take a conclusion that you want, right? And if you have this information, you get the right conclusion, right? While introverted thinking is more, okay, that's the conclusion. What else do you need?
Yes,
right?
Exactly. I kind of give the picture across, and I just want you to take the picture as it is. And I don't need you to. I've already given you the conclusion. You don't need to come start trying to pick apart the conclusion or start trying to reconfigure the conclusion. It's just the conclusion. It's all simple, laid out, nice and neat, and done. And exactly, it's completely different. Exactly, it's like the completely different approach to information giving.
Yeah, but for instance, I think my logic is okay. Look, I mean, I think the logic is as well. The principle is that essentially, I think it is like this. I've reached my conclusions based on the facts, right? But these are my conclusions. If I give you these facts, hopefully you reach the same conclusion. If you haven't reached the same conclusion, okay, let me hear about it, right? I think it's because extroverted thinkers, they are confident about the rightness of their facts. This is more important. The overall conclusion is more changeable and less important, right? So if you give, so for instance, if I maybe a good example, right, is this discussion now with the types that we're having, right? Unlike what may seem when I discuss types in the community, I don't worry so much about people reaching different conclusions of the types, right? For instance, I'm not sure because that isn't, for instance, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to give example, but I'm not sure. I'm not really that worried about when a type that people find is slightly different than the type I think. If somebody decides that somebody is an LSI, who I think is an ESI, vice versa, because they are similar types, and if you don't know the person, from the available information, if you give a little more weight to this or to this, you can get to something that's different. What bothers, basically what bothers me more is, and that's when I become more impatient, it is when somebody is actually using, which is obviously to me, wrong factual information to reach these types, or a wrong information about socionics, right? I totally understand that if you have I totally understand that, for instance, looking at like that video of that girl, that is called ENTj girl.
Yes.
I totally understand. I can see why somebody looking at her would argue and say she's SLE. I think she's more likely LSI, but I confess I can also see why people would argue SLE, and in some cases it can be based on just the information available, which is not very much. As if we had her around, although I have no reason, I don't see why anybody would want her to have her around. But if you have her around, we could ask more questions.
I didn't mind.
And then reach a conclusion. But with the information that we have, I can see how, okay, we can see she's an SLE or an SI. If somebody was using bogus arguments to say she was an LSI, even though I agree she's an LSI, that would annoy me more. Or if somebody was giving arguments to say she was an EAI, which would be completely bogus, right? So this is the kind of, when we discuss socionics, now for instance, there is this other controversy, where they about Kylie Minogue's type. Having observed her a lot, I think she's an IE, but I confess that I cannot make a very tight case because it's not as if I paid a lot of attention to her. So people say she's ESE, everybody says ESE, you know, I mean, it's not a type I find implausible, right? I do think she's an IE, but it's not something that, as long as people don't use absurd arguments.
Yes. And I
worry about conclusion.
Now, interesting. I feel as if I'm meant to look at the things in the way that you're looking at it. I feel that is the proper way of doing it scientifically. However, I do find myself verging towards the opposite, and right. I see it almost as a weakness or a tendency in me.
Right.
In that I tend to go by the conclusion. And I can find myself becoming forgiving of someone if their argument is ridiculous, but it just happens to support my conclusion. There's one person who, I won't mention names, but when they were giving my type, I really couldn't see how their reasoning made any sense or from a socionics perspective. But it just happened to come out as being the same type as me. So instead of critiquing it, I found myself being very interested about it and trying to find out more. And yet, as soon as someone disagrees with a conclusion that I think, the first thing I go to is making it is attacking whether it makes sense in socionics or not.
Yeah, I'm not just saying. And for instance, that the Russian lady Lyubov, right? Which to again, if instead of arguing that if instead of arguing that George W. Bush is an ILE, which I find absurd, if instead of arguing should say, oh, of course she is ESI, and then just put a gallery of people whom she sort of like, and that was all the base of argument, I would feel just slightly better, because I'd say, okay, at least she's not causing confusion as far as his type is concerned. But she's causing confusion that VI is an important thing, right? So I would much rather see a proper argument with.
Oh yes, no, same thing here. I definitely felt I need to insist on one. I was actually criticized for insisting on one because it came across as disrespectful to someone who was of that standing socialist community. She didn't mind at all. I mean, we were actually getting on very well in private conversations. But one of the member base tried to criticize me on the matter and also brought it up on another group. But I'm thinking, but it's quite clear that visual identification isn't accepted in WSS standards, and it's and especially if it doesn't match up to anything else which we've established to be the case.
Yeah. No, I mean, and so that's basically going back to what we're discussing. I think when I look at Socionics types, right? Again, if the reasoning is sound and the fact information is sound, I can understand that people might reach slightly different types, right? But if the argumentation is ridiculous, then I don't care even that they are. So for instance, I mean, not I think what I mean to say now. Okay, oh yes, this type is the same because it looks the same type. I mean, okay, that's really means nothing, right? So I think that's the difference, right? Between having said that, again about types, if I have studied somebody in very detail, a good example is Christopher Hitchens, right? I mean, I have now, for many reasons, paid attention to him for years, well, before he passed away. And so when I reached my typing of him as ESI after a lot of thinking, but a lot of information, right? Yes. So my conclusion is the conclusion which is being distilled from this information, and I see it pointing only to that, right? Now, if somebody wants to say he is another type, then this person had better give at least the same amount of information and thinking that I put to reach there. And if somebody does that, and it's plausible, I could even, wow, maybe it is a type, right? But so I think that's related. The conclusion is stronger depending on the amount of info and the quality of the information, but you only can evaluate the amount and quality of information if that is available, right? If somebody just says, sorry, oh, that guy is at type XYZ, I have no idea whether there is a huge amount of thinking behind, or if it's just personally just pulling that out of thin air, right? And that, I think, is another reason. And I think ESIs, they are concerned about that, because if somebody just pulls information out of thin air, they might think, okay, this is something that I can do as well. I need somebody who will present some actual factual base for that. I think that's how it plays.
I mean, I certainly do understand. I see almost a sense of forum or group courtesy to show you're working in argument. So I mean, because even though I do get the sense that the picture may fit entirely into my head, I need to show why it fits in my head. And I do find that to be an important part. And also, also when it does fit that way, I almost enjoy doing so. For instance, when it came to watching The Four Horsemen with Chris Hitchens and Dennett and the others, I really enjoyed just showing how the differences and how it all fit together properly.
I think, by the way, I mean, Jack, I can't talk much longer because now I have to go to sleep. But
oh, yeah, no, exactly. We've carried on for longer than any hangout that's ever happened before.
Oh yeah,
I think it's because there's so much extroverted logic to you.
Sure.
And it shows a positive correlation. But yeah,
No, sure. But if you have the time, right? If you haven't already, that video is really very good because, as you mentioned, they're talking informally and spontaneously, right? And this is that was, like, by the way, just for information, that was taped in Hitchens' apartment in Washington D.C. Right? And yeah, it was the ESI who invited them, and so essentially, and they're talking informally, right? And it was on a script, right? And I think the types really and the functional strengths really get very and so if you read if you read it all, if you see it all, right?
I plan to.
Yeah, if you see it all, what I mentioned, Dawkins, most of the time they're not really disagreeing with each other very much, but when they get into the possible effect of the meaning of art, etc., and inspiration they can have, this is something that Dawkins is the one who does not can relate to that at all, right?
That's actually one of the reasons why I was talking before and during our talk about you being less dismissive of certain things, about you seeing a potential of going into investigating it. I've noticed with LSEs they tend to be far more dismissive of things that they can't immediately see the use for.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, for instance, right? A good example. Okay, maybe there's a bit of age, because but a good example of an LSE, right, was the first President Bush 41, right? George. Well, which at the time everybody called him just George Bush. After his son became president, now everybody calls him George Herbert Walker Bush, right? But at the time, people just called him George Bush, the father. The guy who was president between 89 and 93. He is still alive. He's an LSE, right? He's an obvious LSE. And it is interesting because in the campaign, he basically mocked, as he himself says, oh, that vision thing, right? Basically thinking he doesn't have a vision. We're not running on a vision. I'm running at how I'm going to be to run this government competently, right? And essentially, pretty much that, right? Essentially thinking that visions, etc., is relevant. Is getting the job done right now in the present, right? And if you want to do the job right now in the present, you just do the job done. If you just worry about visions or speculations or etc., you're essentially just wasting time, because this is all nothing you can do about it anyway, right? So I think. But LSEs, they have a problem even understanding why people would worry or think about this kind of imagination and inspiration things, right? And that's why they are, because that's not where the mind works, right? So that's why they are more close to it, right? Because they don't relate to it. It's interesting because that is why maybe to intuitives, people who are like Aziz can appear to be, well, not less intelligent, because you might see, okay, but just concerned on the here and now, even though, of course, in terms of processing information very quickly, they may be extremely intelligent, right? Again, it depends on the definition of intelligent, and just less interested in that kind of information, right? But anyway, I mean, I started rambling now a bit.
Okay, well, I think that I've learned a lot this evening, and I'm sure that the
Okay.
viewers also learned a lot. We still have 5 people who've carried on. We got that they've really they've soldiered through 2 hours almost. No, hang on,
Who was
3
it?
hours. Wow, that's pretty impressive. So yeah,
Yeah. Who else was seeing it?
I don't know exactly who, but I can see the number of viewers in the bottom right. At one point, we had 12 people watching us, so I think we've done
Wow.
extremely well. We've done very well.
Okay, I'm embarrassed now. I didn't realize into YouTube. Okay, well.
No, I think that personally, I think it's I think we both come across very well.
Okay, cool. I'm glad, and that even with the
It's,
yes.
yes, it's bye from me.
Okay, by the way, I mean, I don't know if it was obvious. I'm pretty sure my gaze wasn't always looking at you because the screen is so small. I was often looking at the
Oh
behind.
yeah. No,
So
no,
that's
no,
my
no, no,
case.
no, it's fine. On the camera, it's absolutely all right in terms of because what you're looking at is not necessarily where the camera is, so that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. No, no,
Okay.
I just want to do the whole World Socionic Society ending like like Jeremy Paxman style. It's bye
Oh,
from
I
me,
see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
and it's bye from you. We've got to do it this way. So and it's bye from me.
And it's bye from you. For me, yes.